welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is basically a crash course in control.
Yeah.
We took this huge stack of sources. I mean, everything from psychological profiles on narcissistic abuse and, criminal law textbooks, all the way to centuries of royal histories. We found one common thread.
And that thread is the anatomy of manipulation.
Exactly.
It's the weaponization of trust. We're looking at how people leverage things like emotional debt or exploit social obligation or even just strategically hide information to seize and maintain power.
And it's wild because whether you are navigating a new relationship or a high-stakes business deal or even just reading about some ancient court scandal, the patterns of control they're identical.
They really are.
And that's our goal for you, the listener, to synthesize these patterns so cleanly that you can hopefully instantly spot these control techniques out in the wild. We're going to start with the deeply personal psychological traps. Then we'll scale up to how these tactics actually become criminal offenses before landing on, the biggest historical stages.
Okay, let's start right at the bedrock of relational abuse. This systematic dismantling of a person's reality. We call it gaslighting.
It's a term everyone uses now, but I think understanding the origin really helps explain the subtlety.
It does.
It comes from that 1938 play, which later became that 1944 film with Ingrid Bergman, Gaslight. And in it, a husband, he subtly dims the gas-powered lights in their home.
Right.
And then just denies that anything has changed, insisting his wife is imagining it.
And that is the perfect analogy, because gaslighting is psychological abuse that's defined by these specific, repeated patterns. The whole point is to make the victim question their sanity,
their memory,
and ultimately their ability to make rational decisions. It's all about that subtle, repeated distortion, not one-off lies.
So if the lights are dimming, but you're constantly being told you're too sensitive or overreacting for even bringing it up, that's a huge red flag.
Oh, a huge one.
So what are the signs that this might be happening to you?
Well, you might find yourself constantly apologizing for things you didn't even do, or feeling just perpetually confused after every single conversation.
Yeah.
But the core sign is that self-doubt. You start hiding things, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you just want to avoid that label of being dramatic or crazy.
And the sources really highlight that the manipulator's goal, it isn't to win the argument in front of them.
No, not at all.
It's to erode the victim's self-trust so completely that they become totally reliant on the manipulator's version of reality.
Exactly. And the tactics are insidious. They won't just deny something, they'll twist the story to make you the aggressor.
Like what?
Things like, I never said that. You're putting words in my mouth. Or, actually, you were the one who started that fight and embarrassed me.
Wow.
And then, when the confrontation really hits a high point, they often deploy affection as a way to disarm you. Come here, you know how much I love you. Let's just forget about this silly thing.
So they offer a temporary escape from the confusion.
It's a reprieve. It draws the victim right back into the cycle.
And sometimes before the gaslighting even begins, there's this acceleration mechanism in the relationship that sort of lays the groundwork for all that control.
Love bombing.
Yes. That intense, rapid idealization phase that just feels like a fairy tale.
Love bombing is defined by two things: speed and excess. We are talking gushing compliments, immediate claims that you are soulmates, sometimes within days or weeks,
right,
coupled with these lavish gifts, jewelry, trips that feel completely out of proportion to the time you've actually spent together.
Okay, but wait, doesn't everyone kind of engage in intense affection and rapid closeness when they first fall in love? I mean, how do we differentiate that from genuine passion?
That's the critical distinction. Genuine passion allows for healthy space, for gradual development. Love bombing is marked by this constant pressure for availability, hourly texts demanding instant responses, and a really rapid push for big commitments, like moving in together way before any solid foundation is built.
That praise fest, as the sources called it creates an addictive high.
Absolutely. There was this one heartbreaking anecdote where the victim described feeling high whenever we talked and instantly low whenever he would ignore me as punishment.
And that high-low cycle creates dependence. The red flag really is the speed at which this idealization phase, which typically lasts only a few weeks to a few months, turns into demands for isolation.
Precisely. They start demanding your undivided attention, and crucially, they pressure you to prioritize them over all your existing friends and family.
That's the control mechanism.
That's it. You sever the victim support network. That ensures that when the devaluation phase begins, the victim has nowhere else to turn for a reality check.
The final tool in this personal toolkit of control is the strategic introduction of a third party. Triangulation.
Right. Triangulation is when one person intentionally brings a third party, an ex, a friend, a coworker, into the relationship dynamic.
But not for support.
Not for support. It's to maintain control and to divide the two primary people. Narcissistic triangulation is the textbook example. Devaluing one person by openly drawing closer to the third party. It just leverages jealousy and confusion.
And this technique is so effective because it immediately creates drama and it forces the two targeted people to communicate through the manipulator.
Exactly. And you see this everywhere, not just in romance. It's rife in office politics. I told the CEO, you weren't comfortable with that project, so I took it. Or in family dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
The manipulator just thrives on the drama and the illusion of superiority it creates. They're the sole source of information. The insight for you, the listener, is that the only effective counter is to see the tactic for what it is.
And go direct.
Go direct. Clarify the facts with that supposed source, the third party, before you react. Don't let the manipulator control the communication channels.
Okay, that psychological toolkit gives us a solid foundation based on emotional debt. Let's take a breath and see how these personal traps scale up legally using the foundational human instinct of reciprocity to create a kind of social debt.
The reciprocity principle. It's a powerful social construct. We feel obligated to return favors. It's why free samples work.
And why waiters get better tips when they leave a piece of candy.
Exactly. Manipulation occurs when these unsolicited favors are given purely to create a debt, which generates what we call reciprocity anxiety, that uncomfortable feeling you have until the obligation is met.
And this is where we move into this really sophisticated, high-level concept the sources discussed, obligatory proxy harm, or OPH.
Right.
This is where reciprocity becomes weaponized to, and I'm quoting here, launder harm through an innocent proxy.
OPH is a masterful way to achieve plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Let's break down the mechanism. Say a business contact gives you a massive, unsolicited favor, a lucrative contract.
Okay. The favor creates the obligation.
Right. Then they wait. They delay their request for months. That's the delay. Then they finally ask you to do something for them. Deposit a large amount of cash, let's say. They claim it's a tax issue and ask you to use an account belonging to a third party.
That's the activation ask, leading to the proxy action. And the harm occurs when that money turns out to be tied to fraud or trafficking, and you, the proxy, are the one who handled it.
Precisely. And the critical point here is that the proxy actor you lacked any intent or awareness of the final harm being committed, and the delay is crucial.
Why?
Because it separates the emotional gratitude from the initial favor from the actual criminal request. It obscures the connection in the proxy's mind. They think they're just returning a favor. They don't think they're committing a crime.
And this connects directly to criminal law. I mean, if the criminal action relies on the type of threat, we have to distinguish between robbery and extortion.
A key distinction. Robbery involves the threat of immediate force. So, Rodney threatens to kill Lindsay right now while pointing to a weapon. That's clear. Extortion, however, involves the threat of future harm. That may or may not involve physical force. So, Rodney threatens to expose Lindsay's drug trafficking if she doesn't pay him next week. Fear is future arrest, not immediate bodily harm.
It's also vital to remind the listener that you don't have to be the primary criminal to be liable.
No.
Not with legal doctrines like accomplice liability and conspiracy. This is where that OPH can drag an innocent proxy right into the criminal net.
Absolutely. The Pinkerton Doctrine is chillingly powerful here. It states that co-conspirators can be held criminally liable for acts committed by others in the group.
Even if you didn't know about them.
Even if you never knew about the specific act, as long as it was reasonably foreseeable and in furtherance of the conspiracy. You join a conspiracy to commit fraud, another member assaults someone to get papers, you could be liable for that assault.
Wow. That makes the stakes incredibly high. Let's pivot to the modern financial exploitation tactics that are really driven by these blueprints, especially online.
We have to talk about romance fraud. It's basically a high-speed financial version of love bombing. Reports of this have more than tripled in the last 6 years.
And the losses are staggering, over $1 billion in 2020.
Staggering. And these schemes perfectly leverage that emotional debt and reliance we were just talking about. They move so quickly from emotional seduction to asking the victim to become a money mule.
And we see countless convictions for money laundering tied to these scams. Individuals sentenced for funneling millions abroad, often to West Africa like Ghana.
Exactly. The emotional manipulation enables the financial fraud. It convinces the victim, they're just helping their partner out of some temporary crisis.
And on a more personal level, there's coerced debt, which is a less visible but equally devastating form of financial control.
Yeah, 52% of survivors in one study reported suffering from this. It's where an abuser forces the victim to open or just directly opens accounts in their name and then drains them.
So what's the defense?
Well, some states, like North Carolina, have civil relief acts to help victims. But the best proactive defense is a security freeze. If you're worried at all, place a security freeze on your credit report immediately. It prevents anyone from opening new accounts in your name.
Good advice. And finally, in the cyber world, all these psychological principles converge into what we call social engineering.
And the sources confirm this is now the dominant attack vector globally. 98% of cyber attacks rely on human manipulation, not some technical failure.
The attackers are just using classic psychological tools.
They are. Pretexting, creating believable scenarios to gain trust, impersonating IT, and leaving infected USB drives lying around to exploit curiosity.
But here's where it gets really interesting for 2025. The AI twist on this. This goes way beyond simple baiting.
It's frighteningly precise. Attackers are now using large language models and machine learning to analyze these massive data sets of corporate communication. They analyze the language, the typical timing of emails, even the signature formats used by high-level executives.
And then they craft a perfect phishing email.
Functionally perfect. It hits the recipient at exactly the right time, with the correct tone and formatting. It bypasses even the most security-conscious employee because the request looks completely legitimate and urgent. The goal is total authenticity to exploit that human instinct to obey authority.
That transition from a stranger in a chat room to a perfect digital impersonation of your CEO is terrifying. It shows that manipulation really does scale up to the grandest stage. Let's move to our final section, historical manipulation.
Looking at royal history, you see the highest stakes costs of desire versus duty, and it often leads to national crises. The 1936 abdication of King Edward VIII to marry Wallis Simpson.
The twice-divorced American.
Right. That didn't just set a precedent for duty versus personal happiness. It was a battle over who controlled the monarchy's image, the man or the institution.
And the experience of his sister, Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend, shows the opposite outcome, where the institution won that struggle for control.
Margaret's romance with the divorce war hero was just met with overwhelming political pressure and royal protocol scrutiny. The institutional power leveraged public opinion and the weight of duty against her.
And they eventually separated.
They did. It confirmed that in these high-level power structures, perceived duty often outweighs personal autonomy, especially when the public is polarized.
But for pure narrative malice, we have to look back to the early Stuart period and the notorious Overbury scandal. This wasn't about love. This was about protecting political control.
This is a dark, complex tale. Ambition, poison, and the murder of a mid-level courtier, Sir Thomas Overbury, in the Tower in 1613.
And the reason?
Pure political maneuvering. Overbury opposed the marriage of his patron, Robert Carr, who was King James I's favorite, to Frances Howard.
And the sources show that the political intrigue surrounding this marriage was just astounding, including this bizarre annulment process for Frances's previous marriage.
Yes. The annulment claimed her first husband was impotent only with her, which was wildly suspicious. This led to swirling accusations that Frances had resorted to witchcraft to secure the annulment and, eliminate Overbury.
And the drama was so extreme that investigators even used Frances Howard's famously magnificent court dresses as evidence.
They did. Their expense and style were used as evidence of her sexual license and pride during the trials, signaling that luxury was tied to moral corruption.
The political damage went straight to the top, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This scandal wasn't contained. It fueled intense suspicions of a popish plot and severely damaged King James I's reputation.
And then he made it worse.
He did. When the investigation finished, James, likely seeking some plausible deniability, allowed the two big fishes, Carr and Howard, to escape the death penalty. That decision just undermined his entire image as a deliverer of impartial justice. It signaled that the king prioritized his courtly favorites over the rule of law.
So we've tracked control from the bedroom to the throne room, and it demonstrates how human vulnerability is always the primary target. Our final minutes should focus on self-defense. If manipulation targets our autonomy, what are the two core tactics we can use to protect ourselves?
The first is simple assertiveness, the broken record technique. When a manipulator is pressuring you, you Just repeat a clear, short refusal without offering excuses or changing the subject.
So if someone's trying to sell you something,
You just say, I'm not in the market for a new one. And then again, thank you, but I'm not in the market for a new one.
the power is in the continuity. You don't offer any new information for them to grab onto. The manipulator realizes the answer is, as one source put it, getting more solid, not weaker.
They usually disengage. The second technique, which is often for highly narcissistic or more severe manipulators, is the gray rock method.
Becoming emotionally boring.
Precisely. You engage minimally, neutrally, and uninterestingly. You become the gray rock to avoid giving the manipulator the emotional supply, the drama, the anger, the excitement that they crave. This is useful for necessary interactions like co-parenting or workplace contact.
But the sources stress a major caveat with this one. It's not without risk.
It's a crucial warning. Using the gray rock method may cause the manipulator to escalate. They might double down, become more aggressive, increase verbal attacks, or critically, they might start targeting others you care about, your children, your colleagues, to get a reaction from you.
And there's a risk to yourself, too.
Yeah. Long-term reliance on that kind of emotional attachment can lead to emotional numbness in the victim. So this is a strategy to deploy carefully and ideally with some therapeutic support.
What a dive. We explored how manipulation, whether through gaslighting, love bombing, exploiting reciprocity, or orchestrating royal intrigue, consistently targets the core human instincts of trust, obligation, and desire.
And remember, awareness really is power. When you can name the tactic, be it OPH in a business scam or triangulation in a challenging family dynamic, you gain the ability to step back, establish clear boundaries, and safeguard your own autonomy and well-being.
Here's one final provocative thought for you to consider, and we pull this directly from our criminal law sources. The crime for receiving stolen property can be legally defined as retaining the property after you discover that it is stolen. So, in which areas of your own life, relationships, financial dynamics, or obligations might you be unconsciously retaining a harmful situation simply because you received or inherited that situation innocently? Think about that moment of realization and the action that follows.
Catch you on the next deep dive.